Welcome to Buckhead Church. My name is April Farmer, and I am the Director of Mentoring, Crisis, and Counseling here at Buckhead Church. Now, we are a church that is for Atlanta and for families, which is why we are so excited to talk with Dr. Tim Elmore today. Now, in addition to my role here, I'm a parent, and in both of those roles, I know firsthand the challenges that parents are facing right now. We have a lot of parents in our community who are trying to figure out how to parent through this pandemic. And that is why this month's event is for your family, specifically parenting through a pandemic. Now, how do parents provide hope to their children when they themselves are dealing with job loss, financial insecurity, and emotional stress? We invited Dr. Tim Elmore to not only encourage parents, but also to provide practical tips on how to lead kids through the challenges brought on by the corona pandemic. Tim's expertise on the emerging generation and generational diversity has led to media coverage everywhere, from the Wall Street Journal to USA Today, and we are excited to have Tim join Buckhead Church and encourage our Atlanta community on how to help our kids rediscover hope after coronavirus. I'm excited for you to join our conversation as we hear what Dr. Tim Elmore has to say about parenting through a pandemic. Dr. Elmore, we are so excited to have you here with us today at Buckhead Church. It's such a delight to be able to interact with you and to kind of glean from your wisdom. I know you've been working with parents and coaches and mentors for years to help them lead and navigate this generation through all of the challenges of life. And you've also written, 30 books that kind of help lead and guide in that direction. Is that true?
Yeah. 37.
37 books.
But yeah, our primary target audience is educators, coaches, parents. It's us who have this next generation growing up under our noses or on the practice field or in the classroom, and we're going, I'm not quite sure I understand their thinking right now. And so we just try to help people connect better between generations.
Yeah, well, that is absolutely why we need you here today. So we're so excited that you're here. Let's dive into this first question. Okay, So for our audience who may not know who you are, would you describe your work and what you're currently working on?
Yeah, so our nonprofit is called Growing Leaders, and that's really what we try to do. It's growing a whole new generation of young leaders who are life ready, career ready. We were talking about our own adult children earlier. We just know that reading, writing, arithmetic are important, but they're not life skills.
Right.
And sometimes a kid can be 4.0 in school and yet graduate and be not ready for a career or not ready for a marriage or a family. So we want to build leaders because minimally we're leading ourselves, but maximally we may be leading a family and at a job or on a field. So that's our goal, is to partner with the adult leader who is trying to connect with the next generation.
Awesome. Now what us what this current generation is called. There's so many names and I can't keep up with all the letters. So tell us what this current generation is. It Z, Y, X, whatever it is.
Yeah. So I was just talking to a Division I NCAA coach who said, I'm trying to figure out my millennial athletes. And I wanted to say, the millennials are your fellow coaches, sir. So millennials are now grown-ups. They're adults. They're our children. Gen Z would be the kids in K-12 that are really growing up in the 21st century. And then the alpha generation would be that generation of younger children who are really pretty much preschool, but they're the youngest batch that really the research is in pencil right now. They're too early to, a 4-year-old's not making a major statement about their life and career.
Right.
But, so Gen Z was really what we try to zero in on. How do we help them build the skill sets they're going to need when they enter this post-COVID world after school?
Absolutely. So based on our, current landscape, all the things that the children are facing these days, what is the difference between this current generation versus former generations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Generation Z is not a continuation of the millennials. We keep batching them all together. Generation Z would be, as I mentioned, the kids that have grown up in the 21st century. So just think for a moment about the 21st century. So it started with Y2K. We thought the world would fall apart.
Oh my gosh,
But then it didn't.
Right.
Thank God. But then immediately after was the dot-com era bubble bursting. September 11th, 2001, terrorist attacks. And then since September 11th, there's been 26,000 other terrorist attacks. So terrorism's been a normal part of the landscape and the conversation. 3 economic recessions since the beginning of the century. So they're always used to an economic downturn.
Right.
Mass shootings. I don't know if you realize this. April, but in 2019, just a couple years ago, there were 419 mass shootings that year, more than we had days in the year.
You're kidding.
So I was talking to some kids in Gwinnett County recently, high schoolers, that said, yeah, Dr. Tim, when we hear a pop in the school, we all duck. We're just sure it's a gun going off.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, life was not supposed to be this way, but it is.
No.
So Gen Z's had a little bit darker time than the millennials had back in the 90s when everything was awesome.
Right.
And we gave them trophies just for showing up on the soccer team, that whole thing. It's a little bit different today.
Wow. Because I mean, as a parent, you don't think about it. You think your kids are almost oblivious to what's going on, because we think as adults, we're the one who kind of are bearing the brunt of all of that. But to think that the kids, it's almost like programmed them to be conditioned to expect certain things. Yeah. So in light of that, what are some of the strengths and the vulnerabilities that this particular generation is having to face?
Well, if you think about it, most, not all, but most have grown up not just with a cell phone, but with a smartphone. That was a game changer. Yeah. The cell phones changed our life. The smartphone transformed our life. So the average teenager in America today would be consuming 10,000 messages every day. When you consider social media, billboards, television, radio, CDs, everything. That's just overwhelming. I get tired just saying that, okay? And you probably do too as a mom, don't you?
Yeah.
So they are, let me just give you a few really upsides. One, they're very entrepreneurial. Okay. So 72% of public high school students in America want to be an entrepreneur. Now, will they all be? No, they won't, but they want to be. They're a maker generation. They want to. So millennials watch YouTube videos when they were in high school. Gen Z wants to make those videos.
Right.
And your son would be a good example.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because it's almost like as a parent, you think traditionally, like you go to school, you get a career, and you walk that path out. But all of the kids now, they're wanting to, do their own thing. And as parents, that's kind of hard.
Yeah, but it is. And they're not just following the party line that way. Right. So here's another one. They're a DIY, a do-it-yourself generation.
Okay.
So think about it. I don't know if this happened in your home, but parents today will say, kids are asking Google questions they used to ask us. Google, Siri, Alexa are the ones that they're going to. So it's a DIY, do it yourself. I'll figure this out.
So it makes a parent feel very disconnected from their
child.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm hearing this. Even though they say we love each other, they're going, I don't feel that kinship I thought I would have that I had with my mom and dad.
Right.
Because kids have that smart device that they're going to. And is it helpful? Of course it is. But yet sometimes they're not sure how to decipher what's fake news, what's bad news, what's wrong. And so we need to not be gods, but we do need to be guides. They don't need us for information, but for interpretation. Let me help you make sense of all that you've taken in.
Right.
That's the new role of a mom and dad today. So that would be there's lots of positives. Yeah. I love these kids. The negatives are, most people would know this, but anxiety levels are higher than ever. Mental health issues are now the norm. It's been normalized.
It has been normalized.
So schools can't seem to keep enough counselors on staff. Dr. Robert Leahy said something very interesting. As we moved into the 21st century, he said, the average teenager in America experiences the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s.
Wait. Say that again?
That's a long sentence, I know.
Oh my goodness.
The average teen in America experiences the same level of anxiety as a psych patient did. These are your people that, as a counselor, did in the 1950s. So they would be in a ward had we gone back 60, 70 years. So you and I both know life doesn't need to be this way, but we were ambushed by smart technology. We didn't know what it would do. It's not all horrible news, it's just too much news.
Yes.
And they're overwhelmed. The number one word that university students use to describe their life, overwhelmed. 94% say, I'm overwhelmed. Almost half say, I'm so overwhelmed, it's difficult to function. And nearly 1 in 10 has thought about suicide in the last year. By the way, I know I'm downloading a lot of data here, but I know you're a smart girl.
It's good.
Last August, the CDC, we're all watching the CDC right now. The CDC released a report that 1 out of 4 young adults, these would be your sons, contemplated suicide in the last month due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 1 out of 4, not 1 out of 50. So I'm thinking to myself, we have got to step in and be more intentional than ever. Not controlling, but intentional in our guiding our young people into healthy adult lives.
Okay, Tim, that is so valuable to know, but it also leaves a parent with so many questions and just wanting so many answers to so many things. But in light of all the stuff that the kids are dealing with and the things that we have to continue to tell them, they just got news that, they canceled school again, or because, things are rising. How do we effectively communicate bad news to kids who are already so emotionally vulnerable?
Yeah, it's not an easy answer to that question. It's a huge one. And any parent that's struggling with it, just know you're normal and you're human.
Yeah.
I would give a handful of thoughts that I think I picked up from parents and educators across the country that are doing it right.
Okay.
The first thought would be always cover personal before work. So if a kid's struggling with schoolwork or all the bad news that's coming in, those of us that are very result-oriented and product-oriented and come on, let's go, get that schoolwork done. I think they need to hear us say, are you okay? Everything okay? You ready to start the day? And then talk if they're not. But if we do that, they will lean into us and the work that needs to be done because we've leaned into them first.
Right.
So personal before work, even for adults.
Yeah.
I think if you're a boss listening right now, your people need to say, are you okay?
Absolutely.
All right, let's get our work done. The second thing I would say is cover hard before easy. So the natural human tendency is whenever we got good news and bad news, jump right to the good news because we want people to be happy. And that's easier for us as the messenger. I'm saying, you know what? If we don't say, listen, I got some sobering news first, all the skeptics out there are going to go, are you a spin doctor? Are you hiding something from me? You're not telling me the whole truth right now. So we need to say, hey, listen, the infections are up right now, but here's what we can do. So hard before easy, personal before work. The third, I would say, is for kids especially, big picture before smaller details. So it's a little bit like they don't really have anything to compare this time to. And we may not either, but they're going, I don't even know what to do. If you can say, here's the big picture, almost like sharing a box top to a jigsaw puzzle. Here's the big picture. Here's where your piece fit. Oh, okay. So
that's a great illustration.
Yeah. Well, it's one of our habitudes. Habitudes are images that form leadership habits.
Okay. That's very helpful.
Puzzle piece and box top. So often we jump right to the puzzle. Just do your schoolwork. Just do that. Just eat your snack. And they're going, what about? So big picture before smaller details would be the third little item I think has been helpful for kids to navigate through the day when a leader, teacher, or parent does it that way.
And it really requires a lot of intentionality on the part of the leader, the teacher, or the parent because it requires time. It requires effort ahead of time,
Forethought.
preparation, exactly, so that you know how to do those things. But how do you, for those parents who may say, well, I'm so stressed out myself, like, I don't know the answers to those questions. How do I give that to my kid when I don't really have it myself?
So, April, the data is in from this last year. Parents have not done as well as the kids have done.
I know.
You can believe it.
I do believe it. I absolutely believe it. We hear from parents all the time, like, this is not working. What do I do?
I don't know if I can do this much longer. Well, and teachers too. Teachers have quit frequently just because it's just, I'm not getting paid enough to do this every day. So again, if a parent's struggling with this, just know you're normal and you're human. But just think about it though. We need to express belief in our kids. They're pretty adaptable.
Yes,
they're kids after all.
Are you smarter than a fifth grader?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So just know we need to begin with belief that they're probably going to be just fine. We need to expect and believe that they will be.
Yes.
But I would say for our self-care, one of our images that I go back to all the time is called the starving baker.
Okay, talk to us
So the
about
starving
that.
baker is the baker that spends so much time baking bread for others, he forgets to eat and starves himself. Number one occupational hazard of any leader, including parents. So we need to make sure, I know self-care may sound cliche, but are we feeding ourselves before we feed anybody else? I can enter the day full if I've first taken care of my time with God and I've spent some time on my knees, just getting calibrated.
Absolutely.
We talked about this before. Asking the Spirit of God to be center of our family, not just some Sunday sidebar.
Absolutely.
That's
Say
tweetable
that
right there.
again. I know.
So anyway, that's a big deal. Another image that I just love that I go to all the time is emotional fuel. Emotional fuel. So think about this. Just like our cars run on gasoline for fuel, I think leaders run on emotional fuel. And that is the intentional relationships we've placed in our life that fill us up rather than deplete us.
And this is for the leaders.
That's right.
This is for the parents
This
and
is
the
for
teachers.
The parents, yeah.
Absolutely.
Kids too, for sure, but parents need to start first.
Correct.
So I would say moms and dads out there, have you let friendships be accidental during this time? Or have you been intentional saying, I need to go to my own mom, maybe, or a good friend who's a part of my small group, and just say, can we just chat and get perspective before I try to give it to my kids? So what are the relationships that are in our lives that are intentional, that fill us rather than deplete us? And by the way, don't we all have depleting people that just whine, and God love them, but we need to make sure that's not the only people around. I'll just stop there.
Absolutely. I mean, but that is so important, because you can't pour out of an empty cup.
That's right.
Absolutely. And that cup needs to be filled constantly. We know children drain the heck out of us.
That's true.
Their need, mom, I need, dad, I need. And so you feel like you're constantly being pulled on, and you're married, or you're, whatever. Yeah. And so there's always that, but filling that place. So being a part of a small group, connecting with other parents and other people who can relate to where you are, because contrary to popular belief, as isolated as we feel, everybody's going through the same exact thing. So that's really, really great news. Yeah. So in having these conversations with our kids, how do we create a safe space as parents, as coaches, as leaders, for our teenagers to feel comfortable coming to us with the stuff that's really challenging to them? Yeah,
that's a great question, April. I would say that what I needed to remember, I'm preaching to me, is it's another little acronym, but it's LEG. The leg I have to stand on with my kids. So the L is listen. You know that as a therapist. We've just got to listen. And I don't just mean, oh yeah, I heard what you said about your homework, but really listening to the subtext between the lines that might be, ooh, he's struggling. He's thought about, is it worth it all to keep going?
Yes.
So listen, the letter E in leg, empathize. As a male, I'll just say, I need to do that. I do feel it, but I sometimes want to get to the results.
Right.
So empathize is, sweetheart, you're right, that is hard. I'm so sorry you lost your prom, or you lost the senior dance, or whatever. But then the G, guide. So listen, empathize are a little incomplete unless we say, but there is a silver lining to this whole thing. Or, we may have never discovered that had we not gone through this. Doesn't that sound scriptural?
Yes.
In the world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer.
Yes.
Jesus guided us.
Yes.
So anyway, I would say that would be a big, big deal. One thing I've found some parents do that's just brilliant. It's a term you probably know, but it's called psychological distancing. So if you have a teenager, you probably know every teenager knows everything. They do. They just know it. So if you see your teen struggling, and don't say anything about their struggle, just if you see them struggling, say, hey, sweetheart, can I ask you a question? If your best friend was really just feeling anxious or depressed or maybe having a panic attack, what advice would you give them? Well, they know what to say, blah, 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 blah. And then you say, now I want you to march in the bathroom, look in the mirror, and give that advice to that person to everybody. Psychological distancing is where you just step back and say, am I practicing what I'm preaching? Moms and dads need to do this. Yeah. We all know the right answer, but sometimes we're not even doing it ourselves. So people do what people see, not what they hear. Otherwise, we would have lectured our way into a wonderful household.
Oh, my goodness. So, people do what people see. Kids do what they see.
That's so true. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great reminder for parents.
It is.
Even as we go through our own issues and struggles when it comes to this COVID season, having to be home with kids when you were counting on that teacher to be there, having to navigate, digital learning, and I don't even know how to, do anything digital myself. But I love what you said, listening and intentional listening and empathizing.
Yeah.
Recognizing, I think one of the terms that comes to my mind is reflective listening.
Yes.
So what you're saying is X, Y, and Z, and let that kid say, no, that's not what I mean. Okay, break that down for me further. And I think that really creates an atmosphere that does create that safe space for them to feel like, okay, mom really, she's listening to me, and I can take to her how I feel. Yeah. And I know even for me, sometimes as a parent, it meant that I had to recognize what was distracting me. So it may have been my favorite TV show. Yep. I had to say, you know what? I literally did this during the week. Okay, we just won't have any TV at all. Yeah. Because when the TV is on and I'm rushed to get back to my show, you're bothering me.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
interrupting
yeah.
what is bringing me peace
You're in the
right
way.
now.
Yeah.
You're in the way. And when a kid feels like they're in the way, they will stay away.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is really, really great information.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about trauma and some of the repercussions of that and the ease I think that a lot of us are kind of leaning in
Yeah.
on these
Yeah.
emotional issues. But you talk in your book about the difference between PTSD, which is a very common phrase
Yeah.
that I'm hearing a
Yeah.
lot right now, and PTG. Would you kind of elaborate on that for me?
Sure, yeah. So whenever we hear of trauma, at least whenever I hear trauma, I automatically go, up, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's when people are triggered after some traumatic, like a car wreck or coming back from Afghanistan or whatever. That's the sense that we get. And here's something interesting. I just dug this up. 82% of members of Gen Z, our young people, believe they've been traumatized. 82%, so more than 8 out of 10.
Wow.
And that may be true. Whether it's perception or not, that's how they feel. So we automatically think, oh, they're going to have some trigger from this whole bad year. That's not necessarily true. Psychologists will tell us that PTG, post-traumatic growth, is much more likely to happen than PTSD if we guide them well. So
Okay.
the research tells us if someone that's been through trauma gets to sit down with someone like you and just process it, maybe even complain, but a mother is saying, I know, that's so hard. That was hard, wasn't it? But you're really doing the listen, empathize, guide. If you'll do that with them, and then the subject comes up later, and it will, usually after time passes, you begin to see, well, it's not all bad after all. And maybe mama steps in. My mom did this so well for me and says, you know, like I said, we may not have ever had this wonderful blah, 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 had it not been for blah, blah, blah. This is what I think good moms and dads do. It's what good bosses do. So PTG is the result of someone listening and then guiding to help them realize, actually, there were some silver linings to those dark clouds. And maybe the narrative after this COVID-19 that is over is, you know what, that wasn't bad after all. We would have never built these emotional muscles had we not gone through that tough time.
And that's, again, we talked about scripture earlier. That's that
Yeah.
scripture, you know,
It's
consider
true.
it joy when we go
That's
through these
right.
trials, and because it builds so much in us. But how wonderful it is that God uses us as parents, as teachers, as
Yes.
coaches to help them build those muscles to deal with the trials of life. Because truth be told, let's be honest, they're not going to stop after they're a teenager.
That's
They're
true.
not going to stop
Yeah.
as they get older. And so if
true.
we don't properly and efficiently equip our children to be able to handle those things,
Yeah.
post-traumatic growth,
Yes.
to flip it on its head, to say, you know, it doesn't have to be trauma.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be traumatic. This is something that you can actually grow from. And this is something that, you know, that our Heavenly Father teaches us, that He uses to help us grow. Wow, how powerful,
It's powerful, isn't it?
is that?
It's biblical and it's real. Even people outside of faith will go, that is absolutely, it's like going to a weight room and we're lifting weights. And we got our psychological, physical, intellectual, social muscles built during this really weird year of COVID-19.
Yeah. And it helps us as parents offer hope. So talk
Yes.
about that a little bit. How do we offer hope? And in extension to what we've already been talking about, offer hope to a kid who's coming to us and they feel hopeless. You know, they're dealing with this hopeless feeling because their friends are feeling hopeless.
Yes.
And everybody they're seeing on social media is feeling hopeless. Everybody's venting their hopelessness.
Yeah.
How do we as parents combat that and offer hope?
That's another great question. You get 2 points for that. Here's a couple of thoughts that come to my mind. First and foremost, we need to be authentic. So we need to stop the superficial, silly. It's all awesome, isn't it?
Come on.
Yeah,
Come on. Talk about it.
So let's get real. But I have another acronym. What I try to do is research and then give them little tidbits that help them remember. So the word is CAB, C-A-B. So here's what your kids need to come up with hope. The letter C is context. Once again, they really don't have any context for this. The first thing I did with my team of mostly young people at Growing Leaders was to say, did you all know this is the 4th pandemic we've been through in the last 100 years? And each generation, we made it through. Some died, and that was horrible. But we made it through. Here's what we learned. Here's what happened. Here's what we can do.
That's good.
Okay, context.
That's good.
So I think we need to make sure that we offer perspective through context. The letter A in CAB reminds me, they need applications. And by that, it simply means simple, actionable steps. Because it's just so much uncertain out there, we need to say, well, you're right. We're not certain about when we're going to take our mask off. We're not certain about when this, but here's what we're certain of. You need to wash your hands. You need to do this. So applications, that brings clarity.
Yes.
And I just believe people can live okay without certainty. We do all the time. We cannot live well without clarity.
Oh,
and mama and daddy need to offer some clarity. The letter B is more for the heart than the head, April. They need belief. Again, in a very genuine, authentic way, we need to say, you know what, family? I think we're not only going to make it through this, we're going to be stronger for it.
Yes.
Stronger for it.
Yes.
And again, that's a biblical thought. So as cheesy as this may sound, CAB, context, applications, belief, spell the word cab. Every morning when I get up these days, I'm whispering to myself, I got to get in a cab if I'm going to get to my destination, because I'm leading my team and I'm leading my adult children.
That's good.
So anyway, that's my corny answer, but that seems to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's a quick, actionable thing,
Yes.
so for our parents to kind of cling on to and even go over with their children. And this is not something that I think parents, we often miss this, that we feel like we get all the answers and then we just kind of respond to our kids. Walk them through that.
Yes.
Walk them through, we didn't get this through osmosis. Right. This is how we're processing this. This is how mom's dealing with it. Let me share this with you. Let me pray with you. Let me give you the hope or even share my own struggle. And we're going to do this together so they don't feel alone.
You know something, you just triggered something in me. And it's PTG is what you triggered. I'm just kidding. When my kids were growing up, it was pre-pandemic. But I remember talking in a real way when I was struggling. Now, I ended up saying, now, you know what I believe? I believe I'm going to make it. But they saw Dad not as this perfect, wow, he's always got his act together.
Yes.
Shoot, wish I did. But they saw, in fact, my wife and I let our children watch us argue. Not because we thought argument was wonderful, but we wanted to see them. Here they argued. Oh, I see how they resolved it. I can do that too.
Yes.
Rather than go into the room, they never knew. All we knew is Mom and Dad came out and it was okay.
Right.
So I think they need to we need to let them see us struggle, but then we need to let them see us end up with, but you know what? I believe I'm going to make it. I believe I'm going to get that job again. And then our kids are doing what you're doing. Okay, I see how life can be lived.
Yes.
We've got to do that for them.
And when they see it, they'll come to you when they're struggling with it.
Yes,
it's like,
that's
Mom,
right.
I've seen you and Dad do this. Like, y'all were just arguing, but now y'all are kissing. Like, how did that happen?
Yes.
How did you resolve that situation? How did you get past that?
And our answer should not be, I have no idea. We need to be real.
Right, but it makes us, it's such a reflection on us as parents, as teachers, as educators on the importance of our own personal growth. And it's this mirror to say, hey, I have a responsibility to lead these young people.
That's right.
God, help me and lead me so that I can lead that next generation. This is a great tie in how we see this information in light of our faith. Combining those two. This is not something that is separated from our faith, but it's something that's very connected with our faith.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I studied and again put in the pandemic population book an interesting story about the Stockdale paradox. Jim Collins, as a Stanford researcher, wrote about this years ago. But Admiral James Stockdale was the highest ranking officer that was captured in the Vietnam War by the North Vietnamese and imprisoned for 7 years. 7 years of isolation, starvation, torture. But he made it out and was interviewed afterwards. When Collins interviewed Admiral Stockdale and said, how'd you get out? He said, here's what I balanced. It was a balancing act. I balanced hope that I would one day prevail over this with the ability to deal with my day-to-day real life realities that I was going through. Both were important. So Collins said, well, that's interesting. Who didn't make it out? What were the people that didn't make it out? And you know what Stockdale said? It was the optimists that didn't make it out. And he goes, optimists? I thought you said you were optimistic. He said, no, there's a difference between optimism and hope.
Right.
He said the optimists were the people that would say, well, by Thanksgiving, this will all be over. That was an empty promise. Thanksgiving would come and go, and it wasn't over. Well, by Easter, it'll all be. And then he said those people kind of got in a fetal position and eventually just died of a broken heart.
Wow.
He said, what I had to do was say, this is the brutal facts of my harsh reality, a pandemic. But we will prevail in the end. That's every kid needs to hear mom and or dad say, we're going to make it through.
Yes, no matter how difficult it gets, we're going to make it, and we're going to make it through together.
Yeah,
there are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days, but we're going to walk through this together. Yeah. There is an end to this. Wow, that is so awesome. What great information, just so insightful, so helpful to me, helpful to every parent that is watching and participating in this. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, for giving us hope and encouragement as we navigate leading Generation Z and in generations to come. You know, for some it's grandchildren, for some, you know, it's their great grandchildren at some point, but these are nuggets that are lasting and things that we can apply to our adult children, to children in this generation. Well, Tim, you have given us so much valuable information, and we want to leave our parents with just that one final thought from you, that one piece of encouragement. What would that be?
Wow. One final answer here. I tell you what comes to my mind is one of our new images that we really came up with during this COVID-19 quarantine. And it's simply called the flight attendant factor. So we've all been on airplanes. Have you ever noticed when you're flying on a plane, you go through a little turbulence? First thing you do is you grab your seat handles. But the second thing you intuitively do, if it goes on for a while, the turbulence just goes on, you look up at the flight attendant. If she's still smiling, serving up Diet Coke, just laughing, you go, okay, we must be okay. Parents are the flight attendants. Kids are looking up at us, and if we're panicked, they're going to be panicked. But if we're still serving up the Diet Coke and smiling, saying, we're going to make it, they're going to make it.
That's good.
So I just tell myself, again, I have to talk to myself quite a bit. I'm a flight attendant right now. My team needs to hear me say it's okay.
That is awesome. Dr. Tim, thank you so much for that. We appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with us.
You bet.
Wow, that was so valuable. And we are so glad that you were able to join us for this amazing conversation with Dr. Tim Elmore. We hope that you leave this conversation feeling encouraged and equipped with steps to help your kids. And if you want to know more about Dr. Tim Elmore and what he does, please check out growingleaders.com. And if you like the content we specifically talked about today, we would invite you to check out this most recent book called The Pandemic Population: 8 Strategies to Help Generation Z Rediscover Hope After Coronavirus. Now, if you are a parent of a middle or high school students, we have some resources especially for you. We want you to know that you are not alone. We have created environments to come alongside you in your parenting journey. For our middle school students, we have an environment called Transit, where students discover a faith of their own. And for high school students, we have an environment called Inside Out, for those curious about faith and eager to discover how a relationship with Jesus Christ could change their lives, their schools, and our city. Both environments meet weekly and prioritize a small group experience. That's right, your students, your teenagers will have another adult to encourage and support them during this important time in their lives. So stay tuned after this to hear more from our student ministry teams. Again, we hope you enjoyed this conversation today, and we look forward to seeing you back at future For Atlanta events. We are for you, because God is for you. We'll see you next time.
As the pandemic has continued, our church, like many churches, has faced this question: what do we do with our building? If you looked for church on a map, Google would pull up locations of church buildings. But the word church doesn't actually mean building. It means a gathering of people. So let me tell you how we've been gathering and how we'll continue to gather. We've chosen to prioritize our building for the gathering of students. And here's why. It's much easier for adults to have an online substitute for Sunday mornings. While it's not as good as bumping into you in our lobby, and Sundays for us as adults have certainly felt strange, and we really miss being together, Sunday mornings for students are all about relationships. Every middle and high school student who walks through our doors is given a leader, often 2 leaders, who walk throughout life with them. And I cannot emphasize the difference it makes for students to have a guide by their side in this remarkably complicated season. And to everyone that is serving students in this season, thank you. Buckhead Church, we are not a building, we are a gathering. And all throughout this pandemic, we have aspired to gather people. And last month, 1,000 new people joined a small group. We've been gathering for online events. In the last 2 months, we've gathered families together. And since April of last year, we've been opening this lobby for our community to give blood to the Red Cross. And even though it was never about a building, our building is being used for life change. So here's what's coming up. We will meet together in our building for Easter. Then we'll continue prioritizing students meeting together and begin adding in gatherings for elementary students. We've learned how to do these environments in safe ways with masks and limited RSVPs and temperature checks for children and students. We'll continue to host small groups, virtual events, night of worship, and family events. Why? Because just like the very first church, we are for our city. We are for people who don't believe what we believe. We are for students. We are for you. We are for Atlanta.